Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Enyekolu. Now, in a career spanning more than 40 years, the Ghanaian international journalist and African affairs analyst Jon Offei-Ansah has written extensively about Africa for various global publications. As editor of Africa Economic Digest, which used to be the leading publication on African business and the economy in the 1990s, Jon Offei-Ansah steered the magazine through stormy times during the incarceration of its proprietor, the late Chief MKO Abiola. In the early noughties, Mr. Offei-Ansah was a consultant at the Harare-based Media Group newspapers, where he was responsible for capacity building and revamping two titles, the Sunday Mirror and the Daily Mirror. He's also written for the UN publication Africa Recovery, now Africa Renewal, and the New York-based business magazine, The Network Journal. These days, he is the publisher of the online magazine Africa Briefing and does analysis on Africa for Arise News and the BBC, among others. Well, let's speak some more now to the man himself, Jon Offei-Ansah, the African affairs analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, who joins me from London, where he's been, of course, for the past few years. Jon, thank you very much indeed for allowing us to dissect your considerable career. And of course, it has spanned 40 years. Give us a sense of how you've evolved as a journalist through those years.
Well, journalism, actually, I always say that it's a calling, not just a job. And ever since I left school, journalism school in London, all my life, I started at the Ghana High Commission as assistant information officer. I left to become a freelance. I dabbled in music journalism, and then from there, I joined West Africa magazine for a while. I then moved on to the Abiola stable. I was with African Concord as a London correspondent for about a year and a half before I was moved to the Africa Economic Digest, then the leading, as you said, the leading business publication on Africa in the 80s and the 90s. So I was there for about 12 years. I started there as a staff writer at Africa Economic Digest, and ended up as the editor, after 12 years. And I left in 2000, I took a sabbatical back home in Ghana, and I came back 2003, and then went to Zimbabwe as a consultant for the Mirror Group newspapers. I was there for a year and came back and joined News Africa magazine, first as a business editor, and later I became the editor until I quit in the 2012, 2013 to start my own publication, Africa Briefing. So in brief, this is my journey. My journey is a journey up to this point.
Well, that sounds like a very interesting, very fulfilling career. But of course, your Ghanaian, MKO Abiola, who was a former presidential candidate, and some would say a former winning president in Nigeria. I mean, he was quite a tough man, quite a man who was uncompromising about a lot of things. What was it like working with him as one of his editors?
Well, actually, I met him a few occasions. I mean, the first week, a week after my employment at African Concord, I met him at the House of Commons. And he seemed quite affable and quite generous. And I always say this anecdote. I was introduced to him and was giving some money to people, and he saw me, he just looked at me and said, look, I quote him, he said, look, the fact that you are new doesn't mean that you mustn't get something. And he gave me a wad of brand new 50-pound notes. So when I left and counted the money, it was 600 pounds. In those days, it was a lot of money. And I found the man rather generous. And there was a time when he was in South Africa, and he called to get, I think, the number for the Nigerian News Agency or whatever. I forgot. So I managed to get him the number. And the man was so humble and so profuse in his appreciation. He asked for my name, I gave my name, and he said, Mr. Offei-Ansah, thank you. thank you so much. I mean, look, I didn't have any complaints about the man. He was, yes, as a businessman, he was tough, uncompromising, but, you know, on a personal level, I find him, well, his attitude most endearing.
And so here you were, of course, editing one of his most popular magazines. He runs for president, wins the election, and then that election is annulled and Nigeria is thrown into turmoil. And of course, he himself is arrested and incarcerated. I mean, how did that affect you?
Well, it affected everybody, not just me, everybody. And on my part, in fact, we were sort of starved of funds, and I had to be quite creative, very inventive to keep. I had a passion, you know. I learned business journalism. I'm regarded as a business journalist, you know, in many circles in the UK here, and that is where I learned the craft, my trade as a business journalist. So I developed a passion for Africa Briefing, and I could not see, you know, the magazine going under. So I did all I could, you know, to keep the magazine going. You know, I had to learn marketing on, you know, in-house. I had to learn a whole lot other aspects of publishing, which has rather stood me in good stead today. So I learned all this just to keep Africa Economic Digest going. And in fact, I'm grateful that whatever you do, people will be, you might not know, but people will be observing. And I achieved a reputation in London. People say that, look, but for Jon Offei-Ansah, Africa Economic Digest would have collapsed a long time ago. You know, that kind of reputation money cannot buy, and I'm forever grateful, you know, for that.
And you, in the end, though, in spite of all of that, you're persisting with the magazine and so on. I mean, Chief Abiola died in jail, and you then moved on to Zimbabwe in the year 2000. I mean, that was, of course, under the rule of Robert Mugabe. What was it like there as a journalist?
Yeah, so I went in from 2000 to 2002. I was in Ghana on the sabbatical, and I went to Zimbabwe in 2003. Things were tough. I mean, I fell in love with the country. Prior to that, I've been to Harare a few times, but you know, I didn't get to know the place until I went there on that consultancy, and I fell in love with the country. Though, despite the hardships, the spirit of the people, you know, was quite remarkable. Okay, I mean, and it was a time when you went to the shop in the morning, a loaf of bread would be maybe $5. Come midday, it will be $12. Come 3 p.m., it will be $15, and come, you know, maybe 10 p.m., it will be maybe $18 or so. That's how bad, rampant, you know, the inflation was. But
okay,
still,
John, we're almost out of
manage,
time, so I don't mean to interrupt you, but can I just ask you this quickly? You've metamorphosed into Africa Briefing. Just in 20 seconds, tell us about it.
Africa Briefing is meant for a diverse, the readers comprise a diverse demographic of business leaders, professionals, students, academics, you know, and others who like to be kept abreast of, you know, the developments on the continent. You know, it's full of analysis and comment. We go behind the news and analyze the news and comment and inform, you know, our readers. So it is a magazine for the discerning reader.
John, I want to thank you very much indeed. You, of course, do analysis here on Arise News, the BBC, and a bunch of other places. But thank you very much indeed, Jon Offei-Ansah, the editor, publisher of Africa Briefing. He's also an African affairs analyst. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview.